It started with a whisper in a stone-walled church, but by the time the sun set over Balmoral, it had become a royal firestorm. Picture this: Princess Anne, known for her no-nonsense attitude and steel backbone, standing frozen behind a pillar at Crathy Kirk, watching, listening. She wasn't supposed to hear it, but she did. Queen Camilla, newly settled into her role and dressed in regal blue, had just lashed out publicly, unapologetically, at Reverend Kenneth Mackenzie, a beloved figure in both the church and the royal household. It wasn't just a snap of irritation, it was personal, venomous, and delivered in front of stunned parishioners in a place soaked in tradition and royal memory. Crathy Kirk wasn't just any church, it was where Queen Elizabeth had prayed for decades, where Anne herself had married Timothy Lawrence after the fallout of her first marriage. That place held emotional weight, and to see it defiled, not by an outsider, but by Camilla, someone who had clawed her way from scandal into royalty, was, for Anne, a betrayal that couldn't be ignored. Camilla's outburst came after Reverend Mackenzie innocently referenced her 2005 marriage to King Charles, a soft nod to the past, not even remotely accusatory. But to Camilla, still defensive after years of public scrutiny, it triggered something. A relic clinging to outdated dogmas, she snapped. Don't dredge up that ancient rubbish. It was the tone, the setting, and the sheer disrespect that made the moment explode in Anne's mind. As Camilla stormed off, Anne, ever composed, did what most wouldn't expect from a royal. She quietly recorded it all. Her phone was out, the audio crisp, every word captured. That moment turned her from witness to keeper of a secret that could rattle the monarchy's bones. But Anne didn't act out of malice, she acted out of duty. Royal blood doesn't just come with privilege, it comes with responsibility. And Anne felt the weight of both. What came next was a silent war. Anne didn't immediately confront Camilla. She went home to Gap Home Park, played the recording again, and waited. Meanwhile, inside Balmoral, Camilla was already spiraling. She had no idea the incident was recorded, but something in her gut told her she'd gone too far. That whisper of paranoia turned into a plan, one that involved a former SAS guard named Robert. Loyal, experienced, desperate for her approval. She called him late at night, voice shaky but firm. The kind of voice that doesn't beg, but orders. Find it. Destroy it. No one must ever hear that recording. And just like that, a covert mission was underway. One man sent to erase evidence hidden behind royal walls. But Anne, ever the strategist, wasn't naive. She suspected Camilla might retaliate, so she set a trap. A decoy phone in her study, a real recording secured somewhere only she knew. And just as expected, Robert took the bait. He snuck into her study, dodging cameras, armed with knowledge of hidden corridors and a shaky sense of righteousness. But he didn't count on Saran's fiercely loyal assistant working late just a few rooms away. She heard the subtle rustling, the quiet panic of a man trying not to be caught. Within minutes, royal security had him surrounded. Caught red hand holding a decoy, no escape, no plan B, and by morning, everything changed. Anne now had more than just a recording. She had a confession. A soldier's breakdown. And suddenly, the quiet family scandal became a constitutional emergency. Camilla hadn't just disrespected a minister, she'd tried to erase the evidence. And the monarchy, already fragile after years of transition, was now balancing on the edge of collapse. And Anne? She wasn't just a princess anymore, she was the monarchy's last line of defense. Buckingham Palace summoned the Supreme Council in record time. It wasn't a name the public heard often. This wasn't a flashy press conference or a TV address. This was a hidden arm of royal damage control, made up of legal veterans, religious leaders, and advisors who had served multiple monarchs, the kind of men and women who wore tailored suits, spoke in hushed tones, and carried the burden of centuries on their shoulders. And on this particular morning, every one of them looked rattled. Inside the historic oak-paneled council chamber, portraits of monarchs past seemed to stare down with judgment. At the center stood Princess Anne, unshaken, a thick leather file clutched in one hand. No crown, no pretense, just evidence. Cold, undeniable, and damning. She spoke clearly, calmly, like a general laying out facts on a battlefield. She pressed play on a recorder, and Camilla's voice filled the silent room. Arrogant, dismissive. The words, outdated dogmas, sliced through the air. Gasps, murmurs, then silence again. Some members of the council turned pale. Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, closed his eyes and let out a slow, disappointed sigh. This wasn't just about feelings anymore. This was a full frontal insult to the very church that had stood beside the monarchy for centuries. Then came the real punch. Robert, he stood before the room, nervous, disheveled, trembling like a man about to face a firing squad. His confession spilled out in choked bursts. The late-night call, the Queen's desperation, the direct order to retrieve and destroy Anne's recording. I thought I was protecting the monarchy, he stammered, tears streaking his face, but now I see I was being used to protect a lie. The room cracked open. The council debated fiercely. Some wanted immediate suspension of Camilla's royal duties. Others feared the backlash. The monarchy had barely stabilized after the Queen's death. Public trust was already thin. Would Britain survive another royal scandal? Outside the palace, the press was already circling. Word had leaked, not the full details, but enough to stir a frenzy. Headlines screamed betrayal. The Sun plastered Queen Camilla in church shocker across its front page. The Daily Mail went with Princess Camilla war behind palace walls. On social media, it was chaos. The hashtags Moral Queen and Anne for a Crown trended for hours. Thousands posted support for Anne, praising her bravery and calling her the only true royal left. In Scotland, outside Crathy Kirk, dozens of parishioners lit candles and left handwritten notes on the stone walls. "Thank you, Anne, for protecting our faith," one said. "We stand with the church," another read. The message was clear. Camilla had crossed a line, and people weren't in the mood to forgive. Back in the palace, the council made its decision. Camilla would remain queen in title, but she would be stripped of all religious ceremonial duties for 1 full year. No Easter service, no Christmas Day walk, no appearances in churches, and most importantly, she would be required to issue a full public apology at Crathy Kirk, on camera, in front of the same minister she insulted. The decision hit like a thunderclap. King Charles was briefed personally. He slumped into a chair in his private office, his face pale and sunken. He had fought for decades to bring Camilla into the fold, to legitimize their love in the eyes of the nation, and now that very effort stood on the edge of ruin. He whispered to no one in particular, "How did we get here?" Anne, meanwhile, returned to Gatcombe Park in silence. She didn't celebrate, she didn't smile. All she did was look out the window at the vast English countryside and exhale slowly. The truth had done its damage. Now came the reckoning. The crowd outside Crathy Kirk had never been this large. Locals lined the ancient stone walls, tourists huddled with cameras, and journalists packed into roped-off sections like vultures sensing a wounded animal. Scotland's gray sky hung low, and the wind bit with that kind of sharp chill that made people pull their coats tighter. But nobody moved. They were waiting to see something no one had ever witnessed. A reigning queen humbling herself before the people. Camilla stepped out of the black royal car, and it was clear the weight of the moment had hit her. Gone were the flamboyant hats and bright colors. She wore black from neck to toe, no jewelry, no makeup, her eyes puffy from lack of sleep or too many tears. She didn't wave, she didn't smile, she just walked slowly toward the church, one shaky step after another, as if every stride cost her something. Waiting at the entrance was Reverend Mackenzie, still dignified, still wearing the same warmth in his expression he always had. He didn't smirk, he didn't look triumphant, he looked tired. Hurt, but willing to forgive. That was the job, that was faith. Camilla paused in front of the crowd, microphones catching the sound of her breath as she began. "I wish to speak today, not as a queen, but as a person who made a mistake," she said, voice quiet but clear. "I spoke in anger. I disrespected a place that means more to this country than I acknowledged. I insulted a man who has given his life to service, and I forgot what this crown is supposed to represent." Her voice cracked. She didn't fight it. "I apologize to Reverend Mackenzie, to the congregation, to the Church of Scotland, and to the people of this nation. I ask for your forgiveness not as a formality, but as a plea." The apology was done in under 2 minutes. She bowed, deeply and walked into the church with Mackenzie by her side. The crowd was silent. Not a single cheer, but not a single boo either, just a quiet, unsettled stillness. It was done. The queen had fallen, and whether she rose again was now up to time, not title. Inside Balmoral Castle, Charles sat alone in the drawing room. He had watched the apology on a secure live feed. Fingers clenched together, shoulders slumped forward. The man who'd spent a lifetime preparing to rule now looked less like a king and more like a weary father watching his family unravel. He hadn't spoken to Anne since the council verdict, not out of anger, but because he didn't know what to say. She had done what was right, but right didn't always feel good. Sometimes it just felt inevitable. At Gatcombe Park, Anne received a quiet call from Sarah. "It's done," she said. She apologized and simply replied, "Good." Then she hung up. No victory speech. No relief, just the quiet weight of duty finished. In the weeks that followed, Camilla withdrew from public life. No public appearances, no interviews, no smiles in tabloid photos. She retreated to Clarence House, away from cameras, away from whispers. The paper started calling her the Silent Queen. Support for her never fully recovered. Anne, on the other hand, saw a wave of public admiration like never before. Letters flooded in, church leaders praised her integrity, and a viral petition even called her the Queen of Hearts too, but she rejected all titles. "I did what needed to be done," she told a close aide, "not for applause, for the family, for the crown." The monarchy stood, bruised but intact. And somewhere in the echoes of Crothy Kirk, the church bells rang again, not for scandal, not for ceremony, but simply for the truth.